and welcome. I'm Elizabeth Ajadi, your host for 9 to 5 and everything in between. Today, we're diving deep into the often mysterious world of recruitment and building high performing teams. We've all wondered, what do recruiters really look for? How can we cut through the noise, especially when our background isn't the typical mold?
Understand what are global, acceptable, cultural norms or behaviors, like I said earlier on, and then tailor your experience to speak to the JD for the role.
And in an increasingly globalized workforce, how do cultural nuances and biases play out?
First and foremost, to change the system is recognizing the fact that I can be inherently biased.
These are just abstract questions. We're facing a global talent shortage, with 76% of employers struggling to find skilled talent in 2025. Yet, companies with diverse leadership are 36% more likely to outperform financially, and diverse teams boast 19% higher innovation revenue. The challenge, unconscious bias, remains a significant hurdle, acknowledged by 96% of recruiters. This is especially relevant as we see rapid growth of tech in emerging markets like Africa, creating immense opportunities, but also unique recruitment challenges for candidates from non-traditional backgrounds who bring invaluable diverse perspectives.
What you want, like I said earlier on, is to hire someone who can do the job. Whether the person is male, female, based where or X, is based in Nigeria or based in Canada or wherever, it's not so important. It's can you do the job?
To help us navigate this complex landscape and truly understand what it takes to build a global rockstar team, we have an incredible guest, Ibukun Igbinosa. With over 15 years as a global business and HR leader, Ibukun brings a unique blend of strategic HR and business optimization expertise to organizations worldwide. Her background encompasses end-to-end people strategy, management consulting, research, and data analysis. Ibukun has successfully helped companies expand into emerging markets, develop go-to-market strategies, build financial models, and establish robust HR framework systems and talent acquisition processes. In her current role at Vega IT, she's co-leading their strategic expansion into Nigeria, overseeing everything from technical leadership and engineering team growth to talent acquisition, culture, and employer branding in this dynamic emerging market. Ibukun brings a unique and vital perspective on what it takes to find, attract, and grow diverse talent on a global scale. I am so excited for this conversation and hope that you will be able to unlock the recruiter's secrets, understand what organizations are looking for, and how you can position yourself to fill the gaps. Hi, 9 to 5ers. I'm Elizabeth Ajadi, and we're back with the 9 to 5 and everything in between season 2. We've been talking about ripple effects, how market uncertainties have started to impact our daily lives and professional lives, and vice versa, really. How we as contributors to the market and consumers are impacting how the market is shifting and how the organizations, governments are shifting policies and just technology to be able to meet our needs as consumers. Today, we're talking about unlocking recruiters' secrets to help you stand out. As expected, in the season of market volatility, people are the most impacted, jobs are the most impacted. And then you start to wonder, what are organizations looking for? You know, they're letting people go, there's layoffs, and they're adding different people, they're adding new groups of people. Am I becoming outdated? You would ask yourself at such a time as this. Are my skill sets no longer relevant for the workforce for today? So these are the swirling questions that we've seen online and from our listeners and from research, in that people are wondering, what are organizations looking for? So we want to talk about helping you stand out. And we have a seasoned professional who has over 15 years global business and HR experience working with several organizations across the world, from agriculture to technology. She's worked in several spaces and has such great experience and insights for you listeners today, the audience, to really help you unlock those secrets. We hope that you would be able to take away something for you to go back and resharpen your skills, reposition yourself, realign yourselves for you to be marketable in today's environment. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker today, Ibukun Igbinosa. Like I said, she's a seasoned HR recruiter, and I've read about her in the introduction, but I want her to introduce herself and tell us about her current role and past experience, as well as any professional updates. Welcome to the studio, Ibukun.
All right. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. So, my name again is Ibukun Igbinosa. I have about 15 years of experience working across diverse industries. Started in management consulting. I've worked in fintech. I have worked in international development organization, not for profit. I've worked in hospitality industry. I have worked in education. And most recently, I work in tech. I work for one of the foremost software development country in Europe. And I work in Nigeria as the country manager, people and operations for Vega IT, which, like I said earlier on, it's a foremost software development tech company based in Serbia with global offices across different countries of the world. Yeah, that is an introduction of myself in 1-2 minutes. I would most likely refer to some of my experiences as we discuss doing this our ongoing conversation. I probably would refer to my experience and some of the things that I've done in the past so that people can have a good grasp or my experiences as I share some of my experiences to buttress some of the points I'll be making on later today.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad that you were able to make it. And, for the listeners, I always emphasize the power of people and how knowing people and having people in your network or in your network of network is very important in pushing through things for you. Ibuko and I were introduced very recently through a mutual friend who was my lesson teacher when I was in God knows when, middle school. I don't even remember. I was very young. I was in primary school in Nigeria. So here they would consider that middle school. And we've stayed in contact on and off over the years. And, he on my LinkedIn or Instagram and vice versa. And I put out a post that I needed somebody in the HR world. Of course, I know people, but, not everybody feels comfortable sharing about their experience on a platform like this. And so he recommended reaching out to Ibukun, and we hit it off, scheduled a call, had a great intro conversation, and we're like, okay, let's schedule this and let's get it on the calendar. And so for our listeners, I always emphasize why maintaining connections, maintaining relationships will help you stand out, will help you keep pushing things forward, even if it's just one small change that you're able to make. It would push you to greater heights. And so I'm so glad we're having this conversation. And it's a privilege to have you in our studio today.
It's good to be here.
So, we always do this thing in with 9 to 5 and everything in between. We have this ongoing series with the brand called What Would Elizabeth Do? And so I like to pose questions and scenarios to my guests to be able to get their insights, because again, with scenarios, it's easier to be able to see things from a practical lens for people to see themselves in that scenario or an adjacent scenario. So, Ibukun, let's consider a practical scenario today. An organization, either tech, you worked in several industries, management consulting, education, is rapidly scaling their engineering team in Nigeria. And you have two highly promising candidates coming in for a crucial senior level role that requires both strong technical skills and leadership potential. The first candidate, we'll call them candidate A, has a traditional software engineering degree from a well recognized university abroad, followed by several years of established global tech firm experience, perhaps in Europe, perhaps in North America, perhaps in Asia. And their resume is polished and also fits a classic international tech talent profile. That's candidate A. And then you have candidate B, who has developed their expertise primarily within the vibrant Nigerian tech ecosystem. They might have a degree from a local university, perhaps honed their skills through local startups, significant open source contributions, or even unconventional learning paths. They have demonstrated exceptional problem solving skills and they have an innate understanding of the local market needs. Now, from both candidates, we can see that they're both technically capable. So you, as the people and operations leader, overseeing this expansion or overseeing this recruitment, how would you ensure that the evaluation process for this senior role equally values and properly assesses the unique strengths and experience of both candidate A and candidate B, especially when one's journey seems on paper not comparable to the other? How would you look at both candidates in a fair way and bring the right person on board? And to add a little piece to this for the listeners, and this scenario is especially put together because a lot of people do not see themselves in spaces because they think that they're competing against global talent, the best of the best, the cream de la cream. Yes, you are, but it doesn't mean that your sourced experience can't stand toe to toe with this. So I want to put that in mind. And so for our listeners to keep that in mind as they listen to how you approach this.
All right. Thanks very much, Elizabeth. Right. So I would first and foremost say that different organizations have their recruitment strategies, what they're looking for. So, for example, I read a couple of weeks ago that Meta was actively, because they are trying to build their AI leadership and competencies, that they have been trying to poach employees from OpenAI, right? So in that instance, because there is a specific skill sets they are looking to bring on board, right? They are then, particularly looking for organizations who already have shown themselves a leader in that space and then actively going for people who already are in that space that they're looking to develop. So in such an instance, right, where and that's why I said the organizations have different recruitment strategies, what they are pursuing. So in that case, their recruitment is targeted because there is a particular skill set they are looking to onboard, and they are seeing competitors, talent in competitors, and they are going after them. I heard offering hundreds of thousands of dollars and bonuses just to get them on board. But barring that, for any organization that is looking to grow, to expand, to scale, you're growing a product line or you're expanding to another country, basically like those two examples I gave, one of the things or two things you would need to look at first and foremost, I always tell people, friends that are, doing their own startups or people that every now and then are giving consulting or advice, business advice. There are two things you shouldn't compromise on, especially for an organization that is starting or that is scaling: culture fits, right? So irrespective of the degrees or where someone has schooled, one of the things you need to look at is, does this person fit our culture? And being a culture fit, it's not a function of where someone has worked. It's basically in terms of the values that person possesses, right? And if those values, things like being a team player, right, is not particularly a function of where I went to school or where I've worked, right? So if I'm looking for someone who is a culture fit, it really doesn't matter to me whether they schooled in Harvard or, except maybe I am positioning for clients that I think that when they see on my project, people from Yale or Harvard and all of that, and they'll feel like I have a solid team. If I am positioning, right, my business in such a way, maybe I'm looking for, people that went to a particular school or worked with a particular organization. But for me, the first thing first is cultural alignment. Does this person fit into our culture? The second thing is, does this person have the skill sets that I'm looking for? And skills, having a skill set is not particularly a function of where people have gone to school. I have seen people who have grown up in the slums of some of the worst places in the world that have become, global, talented, skilled people that organizations across the world are looking for. And that is a function of how well that person seeks knowledge, how well that person is looking to advance, to grow their skill. And if I am hiring someone based on, so for example, if one of the values for my organization is innovation, someone or people I want to hire people who at every time they are thinking about the why. What else? How can I, they are innovative. Their thinking is don't settle. So for me, that is more important than where they're coming from. What are the things that they have done, right, over the course of their career? Because I know that even in big companies, right, sometimes that organization has plateaued, right? So they are not growing, they're not churning out new products. Or you have in some organization engineers that in fact they are skilled on paper, but they've been on the bench for 6 months, 12 months because there is no client project for them to work on. So if I am looking to hire someone, will I then go and hire an engineer who has been on the bench for 12 months, who has not actively contributed to any open source code or is not basically developing himself or herself just because the person works for an organization X. So, and like I said, different organizations with their positioning, which then goes hand in hand with what their recruitment strategies will be. What product are we building? What do we want to be known for? How do we want our clients to perceive us? And all of that. Those are some of the considerations organizations have that then determine what recruitment strategy they want to pursue. Like I started with Meta, right? For them, we are going after organizations that are foremost in AI because we want to build our AI competencies. And for now, we'll probably not hire someone from a small company or for a small firm because we want people who are already working at the cutting edge of the industry where this area is concerned. So for me, candidate A or candidate B is not necessarily, one is not necessarily better than the other. I think for the candidates themselves, it is basically them knowing how to position based on, so first and foremost, a thorough understanding of what the organization you want to join, what are their values, what are they doing right now, what are they looking at, and how can then I position myself to show that whether I've worked with company A or I have background B, I'm able to show that I align with your values and I have the skill sets that you're looking.
You hit the nail on their head on so many fronts, because a lot of people discount themselves before they're discounted. I always say that you need to put your best foot forward. And one of the things that I talked about interview prep a lot on my platform in small bites and in text form. Like, you need to dig, research that company and know them like the back of your hand. Like, who are
Definitely.
they? Who are their customers? Who are their competitors? What is their most important product line? What are their core values? Because a lot of organizations now do what they call performance evaluation. And they don't just evaluate you based on performing, they evaluate you on your embodiment of their core values as well.
Definitely.
I always have to give an example of something that I've done to show that I'm an accountable associate. Like, you always, on an ongoing basis, they're going to continue evaluating you on that, on those core values. So it's in your best interest to know if the company that you're going for aligns with your core values before you step foot in it. Otherwise, it leads to frustration on both ends. So based on what we've talked about, it sounds like candidate A or B could really get the job because it all depends on how they position themselves to align with the company and the core values. So it's the position is really up for grabs and anybody could get it.
Definitely. Anyone could get it, especially if basically that's what is important to the organization, right? you align with our culture, you can do what you say you are able to do, right? Then yeah, that's all that matters.
I like how you broke it down. So while for the listeners they might think they didn't get in neither here nor there answer, the answer lies in the answer. Okay. Do with that information what you will. So now I want to ask a few questions because again, reiterating to the listeners, we're talking about unlocking recruiters' secrets to help you stand out. And you're wondering what are headhunters looking for when they look at your LinkedIn profile? What are recruiters looking for when they get your resume through the applicant tracking system? We're hoping to gain that behind the scenes insight into that recruitment process with a focus on overcoming cultural biases and standing out in competitive fields. You're going to learn how to present yourself, regardless of what background that you have. If you have candidate B's background, if you have candidate A's background, you're going to learn to position yourself with your strength, leading with your strength, as opposed to leading with just what you think you know. So now, I have a question for you, Ibukun. You are a person who works as a company leader for a global organization. And you've worked with several organizations across different countries. And it's important to be able to interpret and understand cultural nuances in talent acquisition. When you're recruiting teams or building out a group across different geographies, especially if you're working for a company that's expanding into Nigeria, or you're based here working for a company abroad and you're building a team out for them. And you're thinking about those cultural nuances, like, how they approach things, their processes, their communication styles, and just all the things that make them unique to their culture. What are some of those nuances? I've mentioned some of them, or potential biases that you've encountered in global talent acquisition, and how have you addressed them in all the organizations that you've worked for, or how would you mitigate them to ensure that there's a fair and equitable hiring process?
All right. Thanks, Elizabeth. I think that when we talk about cultural nuances, first and foremost, there is the organization recognizing, except I put certain processes in place, I am prone to bias in my recruitment process. That's one. There is also on the part of the candidate who is looking to join any organization, especially a global organization, recognizing also that because I come from this background, because I come from this sort of experiences, there are also cultural biases that I may have or blind spots that I may have. Now, that being said, I know that there are globally accepted cultural behaviors, certain behaviors that as a candidate you need to be aware of, right? And when you're trying to position, whether you're in an interview or you are visible online, there are certain cultural, global acceptable cultural behaviors that you need to be aware of. For example, something as simple as not speaking over people when you are interviewing, right? Not speaking over people, letting people talk before you interject and things like that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, so they are global, so you need to recognize what are globally acceptable behaviors that you need to show from the go get, showing up on time. Not all countries recognize African time, right? So when you need to join an interview or you have to attend a meeting, show up on time, right? And don't say, oh yeah, in Nigeria there is African time. So there are certain things where you need to align. Now, in terms of biases, for organization and individuals, first and foremost, recognizing that they exist. Things as simple as, sometimes some organizations would probably say, oh, this person doesn't speak English quite right. This person talks with an accent. This person is not quite light enough, right? Or is not quite dark enough. Or this person comes from Nigeria, for example, where it is people think that already because of some of the things, some of the news that come out that, oh yeah, already this person is probably maybe as fraudulent competencies or capacity just because the person is from Nigeria and you've heard about all of these princes, right? That want to take your money, 419, and all of those things. And then you'd probably think that, oh, yeah. Or you probably think that people in Africa, how can they be educated? They live on trees, right? And they don't have electricity, they don't have internet, right? So they definitely cannot. How will they have AI skills in Nigeria? How? you know? All of those biases that people may have when they recruit. So first and foremost, to change the system is recognizing the fact that I can be inherently biased. Understanding that it is because we are subject to our upbringing, the societies we are in and all of that. It is possible that we have bias. And then it is putting in place policies, processes, like level playing grounds that ensure that first and foremost, I am not dealing with a bias. So, for example, for some organizations, what they've done is that when people submit their CVs and they're looking at it, they ensure that names are not showing on the CVs. Why? Because I first want to just see the person's capacity, the skills, the things that the person has done first before I am seeing that this person's name is X is Ajanle Koko, right? And then you're already like, what kind of name is Ajanle Koko, right? For some organizations, what they do is that they ensure that there are certain things that could already create a bias in your mind as you're looking at that person's CV, things like name or even the person's location. So if I'm trying to recruit global talent, I'm not really, really bothered whether the person is in Nigeria. So I'm not collecting information that says that this person is in Nigeria or this person is in Kenya or this person is in Ghana that will probably already make me have a bias. I am looking at this CV based purely on the competencies that the person has put on their CVs. Another way organizations, now looking at the organization side, right? So I'm talking about organizations, what they can do to eliminate bias, to ensure that at the end of the day, because really what you want, like I said earlier on, is to hire someone who can do the job. Whether the person is male, female, based where or X, is based in Nigeria or based in Canada or wherever, it's not so important. Is can you do the job? And if what I'm looking at is if you can do the job, then in my recruitment process, what I am looking at is just your competencies, and I am creating avenues that allow me to just look at your competencies and assess you based on the skill sets that you are bringing on board. And the basic requirements, of course, if I am in an English speaking country, I have English speaking clients, I want to ensure that the people I'm hiring are not speaking French, right? Because you then need to be able to communicate. But most importantly, can this person speak English? Can this person write English? What's the basic requirements? But for me, competencies, and I am putting processes in place to just assess that person by their competencies and the values that they have or do not have. On the candidate side, sometimes as candidates also, we create avenues for bias. You find out sometimes people are putting things like their age on the CV. Why do you need to put your age on a CV? Like people do. Who does that? They are putting their ages on their CVs. They are putting whether they are married or they are not married, whether they have kids, whether, the local government they are from, and all of that. So you are putting in your CV or on your CV, information that is not relevant to the role you are trying to apply for. Yeah. So why in the world are you doing that? There is a JD for the role. What is the JD saying that the organization is looking for? And then you then tailor your CVs to show that you have the skill sets they are looking for, the experience that they are looking for, right? The language skill that they are looking for, right? Those are the things that are important. So as a candidate, you are not setting up yourself for bias from the get-go, right? You are not even, at least let the door open, get into that door and then show up and put your best foot forward. But from the get-go, you're not even getting to the door because you've put in hurdles that makes it easy for someone, to sort of open them up to their prejudices or the biases that they may have. So basically, for candidates on the candidate level, for the candidate side rather, understand what are global acceptable cultural norms or behaviors, like I said earlier on, and then tailor your experience to speak to the JD for the role. Keep out unnecessary information that is not required at the point of applying for that position, for that role. And then when you get a chance to walk into the door, show up as your best self. Show why the organization needs to hire you. Show how you would be a plus, how you would move their business, how you would increase their bottom line, how you would deliver expertise, how you would deliver, maximum value to the organization.
You hit the nail on the head. I keep saying you hit the nail on the head every time, but I mean, I don't have any other metaphor to use in this scenario because wow, that's it. That's everything. And going back to some of the things, the points that you made on recognizing globally acceptable behaviors, both on the organization side and the candidate side. I do know though that some countries still require certain information. Because I know specifically in several parts of Asia, you're still required to have your headshot attached to your resume. And so in that scenario, it's an acceptable norm for them. While I find it like, why do you need to know what I look like or who I am again? Because that should not matter. In that scenario, they do require the headshot on the resumes. I use resume, you use CV, but we're talking about the same thing. And so I know there's some countries specifically have some specific things that on a global scale, when you're looking at a big picture, you think, why do you need to know where I'm from? And I remember when I was growing up in Nigeria, I thought it was required to have all of that information on your resume, like your gender, your local government, all these extra detail. And I always wondered to myself, why do you need to know where I live? Why do you need to know all of this information? But I know that as time has gone, at least over the last 2 decades, those are no longer looked at or required for the CV and or resume. And I think a lot of people need to do more research to understand how they need to be tailoring and positioning their resumes for that application. Because again, they're still falling back to age old norms that are no longer relevant today.
Definitely. So,
So,
like I said earlier on, sorry. So, basically, for you, what is important as an applicant is the JD for the role, right? What are they? In the JDs, you will see the vacancy. You see the JD. You see the person specification, right? What basically are they requiring? So, if the organization has required X, Y, Z, of course, for you to be able to apply for the role, go ahead. But if it is not a requirement, then don't put it in there.
yeah, 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 agreed. I want to segue us into scaling and defining talent. Because now we know what culturally or the nuances that they're looking for in acquisition. So I want to talk about like the scaling and defining the talent, especially your experience scaling an organization into a new country or working with global organizations. Beyond technical skills, what are some core universal qualities that you look for in candidates that would not just help them succeed, but help them contribute, specifically in a growing tech industry? So, you mentioned during your introduction that you worked with tech startups in Nigeria. There's several tech startups coming out of Nigeria today. And it's so mind blowing, to see young talent grow something from scratch, from ground up, where they have even limited resources or challenges with access to these technologies, based on from the cost perspective, and then also just from electricity resources that are available to them, just as basic needs to be able to push these things forward. But somehow we have some of the best minds coming out of Nigeria today. I'm biased in that
Definitely.
statement, but I think it is true. When you look at it, the facts speak for themselves. I don't know the numbers, but some of the best minds are coming out of Nigeria. So you have a growing tech hub, a growing tech community, and you're looking to, build. So how are you sourcing? And like, are you looking with online talent acquisition portals like LinkedIn, Indeed? Are you looking through networks of networks or poaching like Meta is? Like, What are some of those strategies that you're implementing to be able to build a strong team so that you hit the ground running?
All right. So recruitment strategies, like I said earlier on, when we said the conversation, right? Each organization basically determine what their recruitment strategy would be. All organizations are supposed to have in place a talent acquisition strategy, right? Which your recruitment strategy then ties into, right? To say this is who we are, and this is our employer value proposition. This is the kind of talent we want. This is how we're going to go about it. This is how we are going to position ourselves within this space, within, what branding initiatives, employer branding initiatives we want to put out there. Where do we want to
Right.
play, and all of those things, which then will determine at the end of the day what recruitment strategy you are going to pursue as an organization. So I thought to start from there, because strategies just don't come out of thin air. What you're pursuing, what you stand for, your branding strategy, your EVP, then determines what you want to do and how you're going to go about it. Now, so there are different ways, organizations can go about that in terms of how we want to hire people into our team. People can do, sourcing. They can go to LinkedIn, GitHub, all of these places where you know that, for example, for the tech space, where you have like vibrant tech communities or online, offline, right? There are talent ops or tech ops where you can, if you're part of that community, you can say, oh yeah, I'm looking for a front end person, I'm looking for a back end person, I'm looking for a full stack engineer, and all of those things. You can hire a third party recruitment agency to say that, you know what, I don't even want to bother my head with recruitment. I just want someone to do the fishing for me. Once you have 10 CVs, just bring it, 15 CVs, and then I will go through it, or even do part of even the recruitment. This is what we're looking for. This is what we're looking for. And I give you the brief, and then give me the talent. I will speak with them. If I like them, I would hire them at the end of the day. So those are different methods that organizations can use in terms of basically trying to attract talent. Sometimes you can even develop a part of your own branding strategy is basically put your brand out there, leverage social media, have a lot of visibility, talk about the things that you're doing within the space, what you have to offer, the kind of work you're doing, the quality work that you're doing, how the employee benefits you have, how your organization is like one of the best places to work in. And then you find out that talents are falling over themselves to actually even come in, right? Once you know that you are there. So for example, I can just imagine Google or Meta today, they put out an ad. There are certain organizations already that if they're looking for if they're looking to hire someone today and put up an ad based on the strong employer brand that they have, before the end of the day, they have probably even shut down that pipeline because they have hundreds of thousands, because they
Applicants.
have hundreds of thousands of CVs to look at, right? So I can imagine if, for example, Meta is expanding, or Google, or any of these big multinationals are expanding to any country, and they basically get there and say, oh, we're hiring. They most likely will not need to do a lot of work, right? Because people already know the brand. So there is, like I said earlier, there is also what approach works for your brand, what approach works for your organization. How big is your brand? For some people, what they need to do in the first instance, especially as they're expanding, is basically building your brand presence, letting people know what you're doing, telling your stories, authentic stories, show, that people can connect with, telling if people join your organization, what is in it for them? How are they going to grow? What are some of the projects they'll be working in? What are some of the international organization exposure that they're going to get working with you? So for some instance, some organizations, what they need to do is like spend time building their employer, their branding, their employer brand, so that people realize what they are doing and building it with authenticity. Know them, know what they're doing. The Googles of this world didn't get there in a day, but they were investing in building their brand. They were investing in putting themselves out there, in talking about what they're doing. They're turning out innovative products that almost everyone in the world is using. So why won't you want to work for such an organization? So building your employer brand definitely helps as as you want to expand, telling your stories, crafting out your employee value proposition. What will employees get when they join you? What is some of the benefits? What is the culture like, and all of those things. And then once you do that, for me, an organization that invest in that process usually makes the recruitment process easier, because people know you, they know your name, they know your brand, and they know what you stand for, and they want to align themselves with you. And then you then decide, how do I want to go about doing this recruitment? Do I want to use word of mouth? Do I want to put it online, job boards? Do I want to add ons? Do I want to source? Or I don't even want to worry myself. I'll just look for other tech companies where I am and then just hire all their staff, right? That is also a strategy. So
Yeah.
different organizations are different strategies that would work for them. But for me, I
Yeah.
think one of the very place to start from for any business as you're expanding is investing in building your brand, what you stand for, and crafting a solid talent acquisition strategy. Recruitment is like down that line, but what is my talent acquisition strategy? Also, of course, tying into your overall business strategy, and crafting that, ensure that that is solid. And then after I've drafted this, how do I then want to go about getting the people that I need to join this organization? Whether I want to outsource it, whether I want to do direct hiring, I want to poach, I want to source, I want to go to tech communities, I want to go to universities, right? To hire people that are just fresh from school and all of that. But first, build your brand, build your talent acquisition strategy.
A lot of people discount branding. They think branding, oh, it's not important, until it is important when they start to have, maybe they laid off a group to build out another group, or they just start to have an exodus of departures from the organization. And then they wonder, what are we doing wrong? What is happening? But at that point, they also still need bodies on the ground to do work, but they don't have a solid pipeline. I've seen that happen over and over again. But I've also seen organizations who do it so well in exactly the way you said it, in that they always have a solid pipeline. They have people, at least I know several organizations now have this, where they say, upload your resume to join our talent community,
Yeah.
and select what types of roles that you want. And so at any given time, they have a pipeline of people to pull from for their headhunters or their recruiters to go and actively go after, based on the pipeline that they have. Because again, that is so important when you're talking about talent acquisition or expansion or building out a team. You said it all, honestly. One of the ways that I actually got into my current organizations was through a third party agency. They outsourced the work for this other organization to go headhunt me, and they headhunted me on LinkedIn. And so that's how I got into my current company. And it's been such an amazing 4 years. And some 4 years there. So there's so many ways that you can really skin this cat when it comes to acquiring talent and getting the best of the best.
I also wanted to add that as organizations start to hire, also they need to remember that their employees are their greatest brand ambassadors, right? They are the one that will go to Glassdoor and put reviews there and all of that. And right now, information is democratized. People can go on Glassdoor, can go anywhere to see what's happening in your organization, can reach out to someone on LinkedIn to say, yeah, this company reached out, they're looking to hire. What, do you work there or you have worked there? Should I go or should I not go? Right. So you need to pay attention to that, right? The experience, what employee experience are you creating for your current employees? Because at the end of the day, they are like your strongest brand ambassadors. A couple of organizations even rely on employee referrals, where employees are even the ones talking about, the great time that they're having in your organization. They're referring their friends, they're referring great talents that they have. People don't sometimes look at it as a recruitment strategy, but it can be a solid recruitment strategy for you. Your employee experience and leveraging on your employees to build a referral pipeline to constantly get people who are as talented as your employees into the organization. So that is also something that you can look at, especially as you start to hire. Rate the best experiences, and they will be the one to sometimes even go and look for the talents that you're looking for.
Exactly. Exactly. It's best because they're already vouched for, so you don't have to do too much there. Earlier, you referenced GitHub and LinkedIn, and it got me thinking about positioning. So, one of the questions that I wanted to ask was from the lens of local talent to global contributor. I know people like to say local talent, local champion, whatever they want to call it, to position yourself as, oh, I don't just know how to do things at this scale that can be scaled into a global organization or global presence. And so I was thinking about, emerging individuals that are coming out of, when you look at people we've talked about, Nigeria is literally almost farming out the best of the best talents today. And so when you look at individuals that are emerging out of these tech hubs like Nigeria, Kenya, even all over East Africa, there's several tech hubs that have grown and they are positioning themselves. They have the opportunity now to position themselves on a global scale for these global expansions. There's several expansions like that happening today where organizations are deciding, okay, we want to move into these spaces because we're able to grow faster. But at the same time, you're not just working locally, you're working across borders. Working from an organization, I'm based in the US, but across the board, I had to work with people across other countries because my company is a global organization across time zones, across different organizations. So how can I best, as a local talent, position myself with my local experiences, with my projects, my unique skill sets to be recognized as, a valuable asset for a global tech company like Google? What specific advice would you give me or Dan to translate that unique background? Because we've talked about it, that it's valuable. Your background is valuable. But how can they translate it into that compelling narrative that would resonate with that international audience, recruiters or hiring managers?
So what I would say is that yes, you can be local, right? But you cannot think local, right? You can be local, but you need to think global. Because the truth is, right now, the world is a global stage. And
Mm,
the world is a global stage, whether you like it or not, right? You're competing with global talents, whether you like it or not. So even if your background is local, even though you do have local experience, right, you need to think global, because the truth is that your competitors or the people that you are competing with for that role, they are not in Nigeria.
mm,
They are not all in Nigeria. They're competing with the people, just like the question you asked when we started on, when you talked about candidates A and candidates B, right?
yeah.
Candidate A, went to Harvard, has worked with Google, has worked with ABC and FIJ and all of the different alphabets that we have, right? They work with different companies, and those are the people that you are competing with, right? So of course, your local background, that you're in Nigeria, you can't play that with to your advantage, For example, one of the things that I've done a lot in my career, in my 15 years, I have worked with a lot of fast growth companies and startups, right? Especially those organizations that are expanding in developing countries or in developing economies. And what that means is that for me, it is a positioning, right? But even though I do understand how the struggles, organizations go through, especially if they are scaling in developing economies of the world. I have not, so I've taken that experience to say, hey, if you want to play in this market, I do understand this market, right? My experience working with organizations in this kind of market shows, because this market is difficult, it's tough. You want to break through in developing countries, it's not business as usual. You need to be innovative. You need to think X way. You need to do this. You need to understand the nuances. You need to understand the economy. You need to understand the people and all of that. So I have local intelligence, but I
Yeah.
do also understand that, yes, despite my local intelligence of developing economies, I also need to have global presence. So I
Yeah.
understand the local economy. I understand the local narratives. But beyond that, I'm also building myself and position myself. And how am I doing that? I am getting global certifications. I am, as much as possible, getting global experiences so that I can but combine my local understanding with global skill sets and experiences. So someone is talking about something in Turkey or something in the UK or a law in the US or global economies. I have an
Right.
understanding of that. And I understand also how the local economy operates. And I can stand in the point where I say that both I am the best of both worlds that you're looking at. So I can have local experience, but I cannot afford to think locally. You see, I need to position that I do have global skills. Yes, I do know you're talking about, oh, yeah, so you're talking about FIRS 16 or FIRS 19. I may be in Nigeria, but I understand FIRS 16. I understand FIRS
Yeah.
19.
Yeah.
And I also understand the most recent our own FCT IRS laws. I do understand it. And as much as I understand global financial laws, I also understand the local financial laws and regulations that govern the economies in the places that I work.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
for an organization that is then looking to expand in a developing in a developing country or continent, they are looking for someone who understands the local market but still has a global mindset. So, for anyone, my advice would be, yes, you can come from a local place. Yes, that experience is valid, right? You understand, you know, all the nuances where you're coming from, but you cannot afford to think local. What global skills can you have, right? What is happening in the global space, right? If you need to go for courses, if you need to upskill yourself, do so that anyone looking at you can understand how this person has that local experience. So it's not a JJC where the Nigerian market is concerned or where the Ghanaian or African market is concerned, but also when we're speaking on a global stage, the person understands what we're talking about. So that is how you then position and then show yourself that hey, I am best of both worlds, right? I have global skill sets, and I am locally relevant. So I am locally relevant, but I have global skill sets if you're looking for it.
We can put that on a t-shirt. You can be local, but you need to think global.
Definitely global, because the world is a
Yeah.
global stage. The people you're
It's a
competing with
global
are not
stage.
people in your background.
Correct. Global certifications, global experiencing, learnings, even taking classes. I always tell people go on Coursera, go on Udemy, go on LinkedIn Learning. There's several avenues to take a global class. Harvard Business School even has some free courses that are just freely
Definitely
available for you to take,
online.
resources online for you to just upskill. And usually they're just like a 4 week course, a 6 week course, something just for you to upskill. Upskilling is so important because it would help you position yourself strategically for the role. And I remember the company that I was thinking about. So it's not even a tech company. It was the NFL, the National Football Association. Yes,
Football.
yes. I was like, I know something. Yeah, so they recently expanded to Ghana to be able to recruit footballers, American football from Ghana. And they now have a training camp in Ghana, which they established either. early last year or late the year before, but I remember seeing it in the Super Bowl announcement or something, where they did this very beautiful ad that integrated the Ghanaian culture into the ad. It was so beautiful and so heartwarming, and I thought that was such a perfect use of advertising and branding to, and also like connecting with the local origin to be able to position themselves like, hey, we're not just bringing our NFL and football. We want to understand the culture. We embrace it. We want it to be a part of who we are and how we operate here. And that honestly ties into this conversation because you've said it earlier. Companies need to brand themselves through the employee experience, their current employee experience, but in their business practices as well, so that people see them as a place to work for, and not just, oh yeah, that brand, no, 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 there's nothing good comes out of them. That all of this impacts how you're able to operate as a business. One thing that I actually wanted to ask earlier, which it skipped my brain because I was so excited to talk about the local talent to global contributor, is you mentioned earlier, that there are key strategies, from branding strategies to recruitment strategies, that companies would then push to recruit talent. But I want to talk about once they've become employees, because you alluded to it. The employee experience is so important in
Definitely.
how you're able yes, in how you're able to move the organization forward. Like, if you treat your employees well, they will scream about you to the rooftops. Their families will know about you, their friends will know about you, like their network would know about you. Like, oh man, that girl is, that woman, that boy, that guy, they're working for a nice organization. They will talk about you everywhere. And so, like, while employees are there, like, how have you in the past, or what initiatives have you implemented to help employees feel valued, integrated, heard, empowered to be able to grow within a global organization? And maybe a second part to that question, or maybe how the right question is, how do you build an inclusive environment that truly leverages diverse perspectives for innovation?
All right. I think that the first thing, so let me just give an example, right? So one of the creative things, like where I currently work, I didn't start this, but it's brilliant nonetheless, right? It's a culture that currently now it's woven into the fabric of what the organization does. So one of the it's basically being able to listen and get feedback from employees. So there is something called, I'm trying to remember the name, Heart Pulse. I think Heart Pulse also. But anyway, it allows employees to be able to sort of give ideas anonymously, speak to situations, say, oh yeah, yeah, we definitely we need this, or why are things being done this way, or why can't we do this and that. And every opportunity that we have when employees talk about suggestions, we need why either they're giving suggestions or they need clarifications about public policy and all of that, or make a suggestion. Then the leadership would review um those suggestions that have come in. And every time that someone says a suggestion, and it's something that is implemented, right? Probably wasn't thought about. Someone says, oh, why don't we do things this way? And then they're like,
Mhm.
oh, really? We didn't think about it. Yeah, sure. We can start doing that. One of the things that we do is across all of our offices, we then have cake to celebrate implementing that idea, right? And it's, yeah, we have cake across all of the offices. And what are we celebrating? We're celebrating the fact that someone had suggested something that we thought we was brilliant, and we're implementing it, and we're celebrating it as an organization, right? Something as simple as that tells
Yeah.
employees that yes, we are someone is listening, the organization is listening, we're being heard, right? When we say something, when we say, oh, suggest, we want to stimulate innovation, we want people to say what's on their mind and all of that, right? For complaints, we address it every time, or we are saying, oh, this is the reason why we're doing this, right? And give provide clarification so that people know that if this is the point that we're towing, this is the reason why we're doing this, And if it's something we never thought about, we implement it and we shout about it. We are implementing this and we are celebrating that someone brought such brilliant idea, right? Something I just gave that example. So of course, each organization will then decide what works for them at different points. But the bottom line is building that culture that employees feel like they're heard, they are part of, the process, right? They are not they are not at the bottom of the food chain, right? Is whatever you say that they do, they don't have a say, they don't have an input, they cannot make suggestions. So I would say that being able to build any culture in any organization of inclusion, is basically giving people an opportunities to be heard. You can take pulse surveys, you can do pulse surveys, suggestion boxes or whatever, town halls, but create opportunities where people feel that they are being heard and they are being seen. And sometimes organizations assume that people will just come forward with these things automatically, but you need to curate opportunities for people to and say it constantly to them. We would want to hear from you, would want to hear from you, feel their heartbeats, let them say what's on their mind, let them contribute, right? Give opportunities. They don't understand something. There are safe places where they can talk about it and they don't feel like they will be retaliated against if I make this suggestion. That is basically how organizations can build an inclusive culture. Can so imagine someone makes a suggestion and we implement it and we celebrate it across not just even just the office you are making the suggestion, and across all of our countries of the world. And we are saying this is the reason why we are celebrating it because someone said this and we are implementing it. That is an example. But for me, I would say that the foundation is giving opportunities for employees to be seen, to be heard, and to feel like they do matter in how decisions are taken in the organization.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that is exactly it. Every year we do this annual surveys, which is like a voice survey or pulse check, like you said. And in those surveys, it reveals really the state of the organization based on the heart of the people. Sometimes you can feel the pulse of it, like how people are generally feeling, but seeing it on paper really solidifies, okay, here's what employees think, here's what we need to focus on. And that really helps the organization to recalibrate and really refocus their energies in employee retention strategies, that is like helping them feel valued, helping them feel heard, implementing the ideas that they've put forward, and just everything that comes with that.
So sometimes a mistake sometimes organizations do, they would create opportunities, but they never do anything about it, right? And of course, if you're saying the same thing again and again, and it doesn't seem like these surveys are just being collected and they're collecting dust somewhere else, nothing is implemented, nothing is changing. Even when you're not implementing, you're not giving feedback to say, oh, this is the reason why we can't do this at the moment, right? We've talked about it or we've heard you, but we can't do this at the moment because of X, Y, Z, or these are the reasons. So if you are just getting those surveys and you're not actively doing anything about it, then it may be counterproductive at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, people just feel like, why fill another survey? Nothing is going to be done. Yeah, duh. Just move on, right?
Oh gosh, yes, yes, yes. I can stay on that point for over an hour and not finish. I want to close out with the future of employer branding and talent attraction. We've talked about how important employer branding is for talent attraction. And so when you're looking ahead into the future, looking ahead into the next few years, particularly for companies expanding into new markets, since that's an area of expertise for you, or those aiming to attract truly global talent, what are there, outside of what we've already talked about, are there other innovative approaches or evolving trends that you're starting to see in how companies will build their brand to attract top tier talent, especially for those with non traditional or diverse backgrounds?
So I think that one of the things that some organizations have started to do in terms of building their brand is basically, you have some organizations that are investing in communities, right? As one of the ways. So one of the things that is coming, more to the fore is the fact that as things are going, right, the talents that we would need in the future, we would need to actively build those talents. Those talents are probably may not be people that just finished from school, right? The way things are going, conventional, even educational means are not actively closing the gaps in terms of the talents that we need for the future of work, right? Going out of universities already, what they have learned is obsolete. As they're learning it is getting obsolete, right? And so what that means is that there has to be some, there has to be, by that, what I mean is that organizations now realizing that the way that we're going, if we need such talent in future, we need to be active participants in building the talent pool of the future that we want. So what a lot of organizations are doing, realizing that, is becoming more and more involved in building the talents that they need, whether they are supporting funding the process or directly funding communities that are dedicated in building the skills for the future. And as they are directly involved in that, either directly funding those initiatives or building talent hubs for themselves, right? My organization, for example, one of the things that we have invested in is internships, where we are bringing people on board, and we by ourselves, are growing and developing and teaching them the skill sets that we need to deliver to our clients. So we are not just leveraging on schools any longer, but we are directly contributing into building that talent pool of the future. And as organizations do that, if employees feel that the talent, the skills that I have today is because X organization funded the foundation, X organization, right, created a talent community, giving us resources, to learn, there is that affiliation, or that natural inclination to want to work with such organizations, right? Because I can see how they are actively contributing to the growth and development of the skill sets of the space of this sector. So I think that that's one thing that we'll probably will see more and more of in future. And I feel that organizations that lead in this, in developing, are just not interested in the finished product, but they are interested in also building and contributing to the finished product in the talent pool. I think those organizations will get to win in the market. So I think that is something that we'll begin to see more and more, and organizations going out of their way to seek out, talent in places that we thought they were hidden before, forming all of these communities and targeting them and growing them, and then being able to recruit this talent because they've been able to buy their allegiance. Another thing that we're going to see that I think that will also sort of help organizations to build their employer brands, to be able to attract talent, is also in the space of social impact, right? It is not just profit, profit, profit. What can I get? What can I build? But how much more are we also making the world better? How much more are we taking out of our resources, of our profits, and then channeling it into the communities that we are working in, so that as we are profiting, the communities that we are in, that we are working out of, they are also growing and they're also profiting, right? They're developing because this organization is within this community. We have seen this community grow, and that will definitely buy them a lot of goodwill and would be like a talent strategy. And you see some of this more and more. I am glad that some organizations right now, a couple of organizations already are having foundation arms to their business. So it's not just the business, right? But we are investing, we are building a foundation that is going back to build the community. So we are not, yes, we are chasing profits, but beyond profits, we are also invested in the growth and development of the places that we are working in. And that is for me a good strategy to build your brand, where people, beyond even the product, they have an emotional connection with you because you have invested in them. So these are some of the things that I think that we will begin to see. And the last but not the least, also organizations more and more leveraging AI to basically enhance their recruitment process. Of course, with AI, as we've said, we need to be careful so that we are not training AI to replicate the biases that we have. But more and more, I think that we also have people leveraging technology. I don't think it's going to end. How can we leverage AI to make our recruitment process seamless and being able to attract the sort of talents that we need to move into the next phase of growth or scaling for the organization? Those would be my final thoughts.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely correct on all fronts. Investing in communities, investing in education, investing in social impact, and of course, leveraging AI. I saw an article from the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He specifically, was warning about the global talent shortage and that organizations need to actively, not passively, actively invest and partner with universities, with colleges to be able to build up and close those skill talent gaps that we have. One of the things you touched on it
Definitely.
completely that I always said about university is that they don't do enough of a good job in keeping up with the corporate world, the outside world, the talent needs in restructuring their curriculum. That's very, very needed. We're still using books from like the 90s or the early 2000s, and those are not as relevant as some technologies are today. Schools need to keep retweaking their curriculum to address current global needs to ensure that the talents that they're producing would be able to hit the ground running and would be suitable workforce of the future. You've touched on all amazing, amazing points from the nuances in understanding the cultural biases. We've talked about a lot of things in how organizations can, remove the human part to be able to use processes to address their biases so that they are recruiting fairly and equitably across the board. There are several avenues that organizations are using to recruit. There's the LinkedIn, there's your portfolio, there's the GitHubs, there's the different talent or tech hubs that exist across local communities. There's networking events, there's conferences, there's a lot of spaces where I've seen organizations leverage to attract talent, top talent. Everybody's usually looking for the unicorns, the creme de la creme. And so they're going to these spaces and you need to position yourselves that way. Or on the employee side, there's several ways that you can position
Definitely.
yourselves, having a very well crafted CV, a well crafted brand message. Even as you, as an employee, you should have a brand message. In the last season, and we're going to link it, in the
Definitely.
last season, talked about your persona branding, how you, as the individual, need to know your brand archetype and understand who you are as a person to be able to brand yourself and know your core values so that you understand how to align with the right organizations. It's not every company that you should be applying to. Apply only to the companies that align with your core values so that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. We've talked about, receiving and giving feedback both on the employee side and the organization side. We've talked about upskilling and getting global certification, global experiences so that you are positioned not just as a local talent, but as a global talent. You can be local, but you need to think global. That's my biggest takeaway from today. I'm definitely getting a shirt printed that says you can be local, but you need to think global. It's been an amazing conversation. There's so much more that I've taken away. I've been taking tons of notes because I'm also learning as I'm on this platform, and I'm so grateful to you, Ibukun, for being here, for sharing all these amazing tips and tricks and strategies that people can use, people, organizations can utilize to attract talent, but also for employees or future employees, candidates to be able to be the talent that organizations are looking for. To our listeners, I always say this, that you are the architect of your journey. And it's no truer than what we've just talked about today. It's all in your hands to be able to craft the path that you want for yourself. You can either stay as a local talent and be good, or you can figure out how to close your skill gap to become a global talent that is sought after. So thank you so much. You can find all our podcasts on all podcast streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube for the visuals, and check out our website, www.the9to5blueprint, for all information regarding the brand. And you can follow us on all social media platforms at the 9 to 5 Blueprint. Ask questions, comment, share, or send us a thank you, or send a thank you to Ibukun. If you would like to connect with Ibukun Igbinosa, you can check her out on LinkedIn, shout her out to thank her for all the amazing things that she shared with us today. Once again, I want to say thank you, Ibukun, to you and to our listeners. Thank you so much for listening. See you on the next one. Bye.